I'd like to welcome our first panel, the DepSecDef, Gordon England, the Undersecretary of Defense, Tina Jonas, General Sattler, the J5, all to discuss the cost of our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the third time that Secretary England and Undersecretary Jonas have agreed to testify before the Budget Committee. You've accepted all of our invitations, and frankly, we very much appreciate your willingness to field our questions so that we can get a better grasp, a better idea of the cost of our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. We also have a second panel of excellent witnesses: Robert Sunshine of the Congressional Budget Office, Stuart Bowen, who is the Special IG for Iraq Reconstruction, Ambassador Joseph Saloom, and Deputy Assistant Secretary John Gastrite from the State Department. The purpose of this hearing, as I said, is to get a better handle, a better grasp, a better idea of the cost of military operations and reconstruction in Iraq and Afghanistan to date, and equally as important, if not more important, how much in future costs we are facing. In particular, we'd like a better understanding of how the requirements or assumptions that underlie the President's budget may have changed over the last several months, and how these changes may affect the cost of operations next year and beyond. Much has happened since the submission of the President's budget. The surge has been implemented, the 2007 War Supplemental has passed, the President's benchmark report has been submitted, the Walter Reed Commission, amongst other things, has been just released, and this is to name only a few. Since February, the monthly burn rate has already increased from $10 billion to $12 billion. We're here not just to count beans. We're here to ask some fundamental questions, because what we're dealing with in our estimation of the cost are constructs that are given to us by GAO, CBO, OMB, well, not OMB, because that's one of the things we're requesting for today. But we've got several different constructs of cost which tend to converge on each other, but we'd like to know, are these approximations correct? And secondly, we'd like to know, does the Department of Defense not keep some similar sort of financial constructs of the cost of operations, both historic and future? Do you have any way of projecting, or do you project in your assemblage of the FIDP, the Future Years Defense Plan, what likely costs are going to be for our deployment in Iraq and Afghanistan? CBO has an estimate, a model, which has been upgraded. I'm going to use their old numbers. CBO said, when we asked them, what's the cost of staying there into the future? CBO said, if you draw down your forces in the theater, and that's Afghanistan and Iraq, to about 75,000 additional troops, a remaining force of 75,000 troops by the year 2013. And if you maintain that steady level of troops through 2017, the 10-year cost is $845 billion. And added to the cost we've already incurred, it's $1.1 to $1.2 trillion. That's a substantial sum of money. There are lots of trade-offs and much-needed things involved in appropriating that level of funding, and we'd like to know if you can regard that as a reasonable approximation of what future costs are likely to be. We understand that about $44.5 billion has been spent, or at least appropriated, and remains to be obligated for reconstruction in Iraq. We'd like to know if that number is correct, and if we have the facilities to show for that sort of substantial outlay, $44.5 billion. In addition, we understand that the Iraqis have allocated $37 billion for reconstruction of their country, but they have yet to spend substantial sums of this money, including $10 billion put aside in a fund that was one of the benchmark objectives in determining whether or not the government was getting underway with projects it needs to do. These are the sort of questions we would like to ask you today, like to explore with you today. We will receive testimony after your testimony about a number of projects there that have not been completed, and yet the contractors have essentially spent 100% of the funds allocated to those projects. We'd like to find out, number one, if these allegations are true, and number two, if there are any consequences for the contractors who have spent fully the amount allocated but have not completed the facilities. That includes 7 of 12 health clinics, 8 of 20 hospitals, a number of public facilities that have not been completed despite the fact that the budgeted amounts of money have been spent. Let me just quickly take a minute to show you the numbers we're talking about so that we're singing to some extent off a same sheet of music, or you at least know what we're talking about. Jose, could you start with the series of charts? We'll just run through these quickly. That's our estimation of the difference in defense costs since the Bush administration took office. The 10-year budget at that time by CBO's forecast were $3.6 trillion. Today it's $5.7 trillion. That's a substantial sum of money. We understand the reasons for it, but it is a substantial sum to accommodate in any budget if you're trying to bring it to balance. Next chart. Here is our layer cake showing the different components of the increase in the defense budget since the year 2000. And you can see that the war supplementals constitute a substantial part of that particular budget. And whether or not they are to continue indefinitely into the future clearly has an impact on our defense program. Next chart. To date, by our estimation, with CBO's help and GAO's help and CRS's help, Operation Iraqi Freedom has cost $450 billion. Operation Enduring Freedom, Afghanistan, $127. Operation No Illegal, $28 million. War funding provided to date is over $600 billion by the calculation of those who have, like CBO and CRS. Next chart. Even though the war has gone on for its 5th year now, it steadily increases. Instead of moving towards a conclusion where we spend less as we achieve our objectives, we're actually spending more and more each year. Now, these numbers in the year 2009 fall off completely because there's no placeholder after that for national defense. But as you can see, there's an ominous indication that the cost is continuing to increase. It has increased steadily for each of the last 5 years. Next chart. This is just a way of figuring out the cost of keeping one troop in an expeditionary force in a theater like Iraq or Afghanistan. It is very, very substantial, $390,000 per troop by simple back-of-the-envelope calculation, dividing the number of troops into the amount spent within that theater. Next chart. And this is another calculation of the cost of Iraqi freedom, which is $450 billion total cost of the U.S. budget to date, per the numbers provided us by CBO and CRS. Next chart. Total cost, $135 billion in 2007. Cost per month comes out to be 11.3. The cost per day, $370 million. A substantial sum of money any way you cut it. Next chart. And this is CBS's chart, which is out of date because we've just gotten a new estimation. But I referred to it in my opening statement earlier. CBO says if you began drawing down your forces such that by the year 2007, by the year 2013, you'd have about 75,000 troops in theater. The cost, and if you then extended that force level of 75,000 troops in theater out over the next 5 years, the cost over 10 years would be $840 billion. Now, that's a consequential number. It has real trade-offs, and that's why we're here today. We will refer to these charts again in the course of our hearing today, but I simply wanted to put them on the wall to let you know what we're working against. If you disagree, that's part of the purpose of this hearing, is to understand where you disagree and to improve our understanding, our grasp of the cost of the war.